Hello, this is Dread from Epic Builds, and in today's video topic, we will go over Bleed, Rive, Abyssal Echoes, Attack Speed Stacking, Ignite Consuming, Forge Guard 2.0. This is an update to one of my favorite builds from the past, as the game has changed significantly since I last played this setup. So the focus of this build is abusing the node in Rive called Execution, which reads, Rive's third strike consumes all stacks of Ignite on enemies it hits, granting you increased physical damage per stack consumed for 2 seconds. This allows us to scale all of our increased damage through stacking global Ignite chance and applying a lot of hits through various means. We can get up to 1500% increased physical damage at times, allowing us to get insane bleed stacks on enemies. The reason why we are Forge Guard is so that we can stack a large amount of attack speed through using a two-handed sword. Our preferred here is a Zweihander thanks to the free 15% physical penetration, which yes works for your bleeds, and we can get close to 200% attack speed, which is not easy without dual wielding, which I didn't want to do because we would be supremely squishy. Also, ForgeGuard has a node that gives you 70% ignite and bleed chance, which is doubled if you're wielding a two-handed weapon, which is another reason we are choosing a Zweihander over other options. So, Abyssal Echoes was changed. We no longer can autocast it, but it's actually better now for us, thanks to the fact it gives us 20% increased attack speed and also gives us way more ignites on single target than before, thanks to Screaming Rifts adding 5 extra hits per cast of Abyssal Echoes, leading to a large amount of ignites for Arrive to consume, leading to a higher damage bleed on single targets quicker, especially since we don't benefit from consuming ignites from multiple enemies while we're killing a single target. So it just helps us out get our increased damage much higher. So a common question slash comment I'm probably going to receive is, Dread, why don't you grab the instant bleed damage node inside Echoes? It's only 1 point. Well, that's a common trap for bleed builds in regards to Sentinel. The biggest problem with this node is the lack of understanding of how strong ailments can be. So our third strike from Rive also gives us a global 15% leech buff, which allows us to leech from bleeds we apply on enemies. Now, if you're new to last epoch, leech on dots work very differently. Each time a dot ticks for damage per half second, it applies a new leech instance, meaning that they stack quickly. Normally, if you're a hit based build and you apply your damage and you leech back said damage and reach full life, the leech stops. So even if you leech 20 million damage, you will stop leeching when you reach to full life and the rest of the leech is discarded. That sucks a lot. But dots are better since they tick each second and their damage is segmented. It means that when a dot leech puts you to full HP, your leech doesn't stop because since the enemy is still bleeding, it means every time we take damage, we just go back to full life due to the dots we are inflicting. This leads to insane sustain, which if we were to deal our damage with our bleeds instantly, this leech would end instantly. It also somewhat disincentivizes the usage of Valdir's Chalice, as its main strength is having a lot of bleeds on enemies as they die, which of course is turned off if your bleeds are instantly deal their damage. Which, of course, if you kill the enemy and their bleeds went off instantly, that means there are no more bleeds on the target, which means there's no bleeds to gain HP on kill, which Valdir's Chalice provides, which heals us to full every time on whenever an enemy dies, by the way. So the instant damage pop on Abyssal Echoes is a huge trap, so I hope this helps you understand why I did not grab it for this build. One thing to note that I had to change was the utilization of liquid iron inside ForgeGuard's passive tree. It pretty much gives us 30% DR versus damage over time sources, which is one of our primary problems for a build like this, because armor doesn't defend against damage over time, which is our main defense, so we are pretty much forced to grab this to make it feel good. With all that being said, if you enjoyed the video and like Last Epoch, I'd suggest leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel, as that's the best way to support me here at Epic Builds. Now let's get into the video, shall we? Alright, here we are in game with the build, the Bleed Rive Forge Guard here. So the first thing you're probably going to ask is, Dread, what happened to your glasses? Well, with a little accident with Mrs. Epic Builds, my glasses have been somewhat destroyed. So we're going to be getting a new pair of glasses soon. But for now, you guys are just gonna have to deal with Mister Crooked Glasses for a bit. So, the general skill rotation of the build here is to simply set up our sigil setup, and then of course apply our abyssal echoes on a target here. You can just hold down the buttons, the action queuing, and the increased attack and cast speed we have makes it pretty much easy just to hold down the buttons. As you can tell, we can get up to like 300k DPS with our abyssal echoes Rive stuff, but it goes up and down, so it's kind of like more like 200k DPS. It goes like up and down, but it's pretty good. And as you can tell with our increased physical damage here, which I will set up here again, you get up to like 1100, 1200, 1500. It like goes up and down, up and down, up and down, of course, with the nature of the build. And that's how we pretty much deal all of our single target damage. And of course, whenever we're in packs, our pull from our Rive's second strike, thanks to challenge, makes it so that enemies get closer to us, which means they enter our little arena caused by Abyssal Echoes, which also heals us and, does a lot of other stuff, applies ignites to everything, which gives us more damage, which makes clearing an absolute joke. Which is pretty nice because Rive normally is really bad in terms of clear because of just, not having enough AoE. So that helps a lot. So let's get into the skills, shall we? So for the first two points, we take 2 points into Sever Travel, although the Ignite chance is nice. 1 point into Twisting Fangs, travel. 1 point into execution. This is what the build is all made around. Let me move my camera here. This is the node that the whole build is made around. This is like how we get all of our increased damage. It's kind of like the Surf and Strike setup where the more attack speed you have, the more damage you deal. It's pretty much the same setup. And of course, 3 points into Assassin Sustenance because 15% global health leech this applies to your dots is absolutely insane and probably will get like probably damage over time leech is probably going to get nerfed eventually sometime soon because it is absolutely busted, as many people in the community like to point out. Now, 4 points into Trampling Atsuwaddle for 20% more damage. This applies to all of our hits and not just Rive's third hit, which is more important because we're actually dealing damage with all of our hits, right? We take 3 points into Outburst so that we have a bigger AoE with our Rive because the bigger AoE means the more stuff we hit and the more, ignites we consume to do more damage. And the more AoE we have, of course. Then 4 points into Flurry for increased attack and cast speed. Well, attack speed for our first and second strike, which makes our attack speed look really fast later on. For a two-handed weapon, yeah, that's insane. Then 1 point travel into Iron Reach, then 1 point into Challenge, which strike pulls enemies nearby you. Pull is something that last Epoch has been EHG has been kind of phasing out of late, but I really hope that they don't phase it out of stuff like melee attacks, like challenge, because it allows you to clear things much quicker, which you normally would not be able to. Because being able to pull enemies into your AoE is a very strong thing, and it makes melee builds feel not so melee. And even though you're still melee, so I really hope that like that stays. Like this kind of pull is fine. Pull on Abyssal Echoes, as you can tell, my glasses are starting to get fucked up, like I told you. Yeah, Abyssal Echoes pull was OP, so that's why that was nerfed. God, the glasses thing is so funny. Uh, but like the Rive pull is not OP, it's just strong, which I like. So I hope that they keep that. Sigil, stereotypical setup. The only difference is instead of less damage into empowering sigils and less armor, we go for ignite chance instead here because the more ignite chance, of course, the more ignites we apply to enemies, which means the more ignites we consume, which means more increased damage. So this is actually way more increased damage than this ever would be. And of course, reversal. Reversal is a little different since we don't use reversal for mana, thanks to Rive generating all of our mana for us. It means that we can go for the much more cooldown intensive version of reversal. And as you can tell here, 2.4 seconds, which is much better than the 4 second version, which allows us to apply the 60% increased damage taken much quicker. It also gives us attack speed up more often, of course, the movement speed up more often. So just having this up way more is way better than not having that. So being able to run time loss wisdom is one of the most overpowered things that Rive has, is being able to just simply not have to like spend so long kind of like charging up your reversal here, having like a pretty much 100% uptime. Then for lunch here, stereotypical lunch setup, nothing really crazy. We went for the coal because coal's really strong. The health gained on missing health. As I make more and more Sentinel builds, this node is becoming a much more favorite of mine, as it is pretty much all of our sustain while we're just rushing through monoliths trying to get objectives. So this is very strong. And of course, the invulnerability while lunging allows us to not take damage, and of course, the extra charge. And that's pretty much the important part with lunge. You can pretty much set it up however you want. Then Abyssal Echoes. And we take 5 points into Deep Expanse because the bigger it is, the more ignites we can apply to a bigger area of enemies, which is better for us for Rive's Third Strike, so that we can consume more ignites and get more damage while clearing, which makes our clearing feel buttery smooth. Then 1 point travel into Vorpal Explosion, although our Abyssal Echoes does apply bleed, so we are applying bleed with Abyssal Echoes, so we can deal a decent amount of damage with it. So having the 80% more damage is kind of cool. Then 1 point to Screaming Rifts, which allows you to apply it at a target location, and of course it will scream for 3 more. It'll attack for 3 more times. Well, 2 more, and then we can get 2 extra right here. So we actually get, I think, yeah, 6 total. 6 total attacks. So every single time we cast it, and of course they can be overlaid as well. So you just get a bunch of Abyssal Echoes going off and applying ignites and bleeds, which is really cool on single target. And since we have a bunch of cast speed from just everything that we have, it means that it's pretty much quick to apply it on a single target. So we can kind of just hold down the button and it will queue for us, especially since our attack speed is so fast. So just having that queue that they introduced a few patches ago feels so good for this build. Makes up for the fact that there's no instant cast. Oh my god, my glasses are just gonna make me mauled. Then 4 points in the Fiery Chasm, Abyssal Echoes, Initial Burst. This is pretty much just 200% increased ignite chance for the hit. Then 1 point into Potent Corruption, so that our Abyssal Echoes counts as a hit, so that it will apply a hit, which will take all of our global stuff and apply it per second, or bleed and ignite, which is really good. Then 1 point into Void Purifier, so that we can gain healing from the Abyssal Echoes. So if we have 2 Abyssal Echoes, we get like 100 healing per tick, and that helps us be tanky. It's not as strong as the old version was, where like you would heal from every single Abyssal Echoes and they'd like clear the whole screen. It's not as strong as that anymore, but it's like whatever. Then 4 points into Embrace the Darkness for the increased attack speed and damage over time when we self-cast Abyssal Echoes, which is all the time, which makes up for the loss of attack speed through other changes and nerfs. And that's pretty much it for the skills. Now for the passives here. 8 points into Fearless for HP. We want as much max HP as humanly possible. 5 points into Armor Clad for the DR. We're always nearby enemies. 2 points travel to Valiant Charge. 5 points in the Time of Faith. This allows us to spam all of our stuff off cooldown and allows us to keep our sigils up without having to use reversal. And then, of course, reversal can be used towards just spamming it so that we get more of the dot and more of the attack speed buff and all that. So that's pretty much why we're setting up that like that. Then 5 points to Axe Thrower. This will apply our bleed chance per second and it extra ignites as well. And it has a secondary purpose, which I'll show you in a second here. Then 5 points into Blade Master for the increased attack speed. This is one of the strongest nodes for us because attack speed is very good for us. Then 10 points travel into Abyssal Endurance so we can get access to Abyssal Echoes, although that increased physical and void and HP is very strong. Then 7 out of 8 points for Defiance for the elemental resistance. Then 8 points into Conviction for the physical penetration. Now, if you are feeling a little bit on the squishy side and you're not like so you need a little bit more HP, you could always run Valor. I think maybe 1 point into Divine Bolt might be strong too because it can apply more stacks. It might be the way to go, but definitely Valor could be the way to go over Conviction. I just haven't really decided. You could always go for Phoenix Strike as well for extra melee ignite chance, but this is only melee ignite chance and it's not global. So your Abyssal Echoes, your Reversal, like your Axe, none of them get benefited from this ignite chance. So it's really hard to justify it because of that. So that's why we don't grab it. Then, of course, 9 out of 10 points in Weapons Master. The damage doesn't matter. We just care about the travel. 1 point travel into Peltist. 10 points into Guardian because we want as much HP as possible. 4 points into Shield Breaker for the physical shred stacks. This will apply to our bleeds. And we get close to Fizz Shred cap with this. And it helps a lot because our axe is going off all the time, which helps us, Fizz Shred stack. Then 10 points to Smelter's Might. This is the whole reason why the build works, is because it gives us a buttload of bleed and ignite chance, and it doubles when we have a two-handed weapon, which we do, which helps us get a lot of bleeding and ignite chance, which makes up for the fact that we're using a two-hander instead of dual wielding. Then 1 point Iron Reflexes. That's mainly because we get a bunch of flat dodge from Wing Guards, which then can be turned into flat armor thanks to Iron Reflexes, which turns dodge into armor, so that we just get a bunch more armor to work with. Then 5 out of 6 points in the might. Eventually want 6 points, but I couldn't find the points because I needed to put points in the liquid iron. Then 5 points in infinite bulwark because the increased armor on potion is insanely strong, as you can just tell here. Get up to 62% without anything else on us. Then 5 points into liquid iron for the less damage over time taken. We're always using a potion because we're a forge guard, so we pretty much have 30% less damage taken, which is very important because since all of our defense comes from our large amount of armor, what happens is we die to dots because we have a low amount of HP, even though we're technically tanky. It's just we're tanky versus hits and not dots. But liquid iron solves all that, and now we don't take much damage from dots anymore, and we have a cleanse pot, so that helps a lot. Then 8 points in the Molded by the Forge. Whole point why we're a Forge Guard because of the 40% increased attack speed with the two-handed weapon, which we're using, which is a Zweihander. And that's pretty much it for the passives. Now for the gearing. My sword, this is not perfect. You could go for increased physical damage and or damage over time instead of that melee cold damage. It didn't really matter because I already had 1500% increased physical damage, so I didn't really care about having extra here. And of course, the increased attack speed is very important. It's very important to be on Swayhander because that 15% pen is very strong. And then, of course, bleed on hit and ignite on hit. Generally, going for an exalted bleed on hit is better than going for exalted ignite on hit because we want as much bleed chance as possible. Then for the helmet, bleed duration, bleed effect, HP, endurance. This is a very good slot for sealing a prefix. And then we can go for like vitality, or you can go like there's a lot of things you do. Mainly vitality is a good one. Then amulet, we want a jade amulet because it gives us increased attack speed. Mine rolled very poorly, but then of course we can get damage over time and physical pen. You could technically go for healing effectiveness here. You could go for healing effectiveness on a lot of these items so that you could get way more healing from Abyssal Echoes to make you much tankier, but that's really up to your discretion. And if you feel like as though you're not tanky enough, you need more chunk, right? Of course, resistance. I don't have frailty yet in the build. That was a little bit of a mistake on my part because our relics sucked up by Valdir's, so it's kind of sucked. But it's just how it is sometimes. Then the rings, HP, resistance, endurance, whatever you need. I went for just damage and HP, resistance, crit avoid, the usual. Obviously, you could get way better rings than this. One ring that's really good for the build is a Quicksilver coil. Quicksilver coils are really strong for this build. If you have a Quicksilver coil with like increase up to like 9 to 10% increased melee attack speed, this can be very strong for us as it's just a bunch of free damage because we want as much increased attack speed as possible. Now, obviously, you'd want to wait till you get like really good ones with like 2 LP or whatever with a really high attack speed roll. So that's one thing you could upgrade into. The belt, HP cleanse. That's the most important part. You don't really care about anything else on the belt. Probably try to get more potions than me. I only have 3 on this one. I don't know why I chose to run such a bad belt, actually, now I think about it. You probably want a way better belt than this. Wing guards, these are pretty good to farm for LP. Get attack speed, HP, crit avoid, the usual. The dodge rating is really cool because we get to convert it to armor. The endurance on the implicit's really strong too. And of course, attack speed, haste, the usual. These boots are terrible. You'd want vitality instead of intelligence, and you want HP or crit avoid or hybrid health and movement speed. But other like these are terrible. Then Valdir's Chalice here. This is why we sustain so hard during during clear because when something dies, we get 20 health gained on kill per stack of bleed on the target. So just for reference, we apply like 4, 8, 12, 15. It's like, and we attack a lot, and that's not including our, of course, our Abyssal Echoes. So during clear, we actually get a lot of HP on kill, which is insanely strong. The Viz damage over time leech is pretty strong. The bleed duration is essential because we want as much bleed duration as possible. Uh, Of course, getting the leech inside Assassin Sustenance here is better, but having that extra 2% is always good. And that's pretty much it for the build. Idols, I went for a Throne of Ambition because we want to increase armor on single target. So if you don't know, as a Forge Guard, all of your increased armor comes from your Mastery bonus, which is this. 3% increased armor. Oh, 3% increased armor for each hit you've taken in the last 10 seconds. That's where all of your increased armor comes from. So on clear, but for single target, things don't hit you as often. So Throne of Ambition is a perfect setup so that we get to like 70% armor while we're on a boss, which is insanely strong. Then, of course, Ignite on health, damage over time would be a better prefix on this one. And of course, bleed on hit, the usual. You could go for Rive AoE, but I like the get the extra bleed chance. Bleed duration is a really good 3x1. Of course, I put the rest with resistance, but you could go for another bleed duration idol. Like, there's a lot of things you could do with idols. You don't technically need throne if you're not boss killing, so it's like you could take it out, put HP idols there. There's a lot of things you could do with this build, and I plan on revisiting it again when I have a pair of one thing I want to do eventually in the future is I want to run this same setup, but we're going to run Assault the Wounds. I need to Assault the Wounds with attack speed on them. Mainly, like with like, if I could get Assault the Wounds with attack speed on them, we could run that instead of these Wing Guards. We could run crit multi, attack speed, and then run like crit multi everywhere, and then get a gigaton of bleed effect, which would mean a lot more in terms of damage. The problem is, since we don't have, like, we need attack speed. Like, attack speed is very important. If we don't have attack speed, then we're not going to get the increased damage that we're getting right now. So having them with attack speed is essential to make the build feel good. So that's one thing I would do eventually, is swap over to Salt the Wounds when you have more attack speed. More attack speed. Yeah. With all that being said, thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you're at, and bye.